most of the time here as well. I've been here a year myself. So it's an honor to be here with you tonight. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our amazing speaker, Nell Feldman, who is the Chief Information Security Officer here at Montgomery College. She's going to share an amazing story with us, very motivational. So Nell Feldman is the Chief Information Security Officer at Montgomery College, where she provides direction and insight to secure and protect the college's information assets and supporting infrastructure from external and internal threats, specifically focusing on IT risk management, data protection, privacy, and compliance. Nell joined the college in 2004 in IT applications as the database services manager and transitioned to managing the IT security group in 2015. She assumed the role of the CISO on July 1st, 2022, so just last year. Prior to her tenure at MC, Nell worked in development and marketing at the National Museum of Women in Arts and Jewish Women International. After receiving her MBA at the University of Maryland Smith School of Business, Nell transitioned to the IT field, working as a quality assurance analyst and software engineer before focusing on database administration and IT security. She is nationally recognized as a certified information system security professional and was included as part of the team which created questions for the, you're going to help me, ISC squared, CISSP exam, which recognizes professional excellence and competence in cybersecurity. So I don't know about all of you, but this is an impressive biography that you have. It is really an honor. I'm sure everybody here, but I'm especially curious. How do you go from an artist to cybersecurity? Because there's a lot of career changers. I think the pandemic kind of put people in a different headspace of there might be something else that I want to do, or a gift or a talent. So I'm excited to hear what your journey was. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kimberly, for that great introduction. I'm happy to be here and share my story. Eduardo is going to advance the slides for me, so you can move to the next slide if you like. There are a lot of slides, I will tell you. As Kimberly mentioned, I've been at the college since 2004, 19 years, and I've been with the Office of Information Technology that entire time, but I've had a variety of roles. But what my bio doesn't tell you is I actually got my start in theater. I majored in theater at Towson University, and well, best laid plans don't always work out quite as we expect. So what happened between then and now? And that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. Go ahead, Eduardo. So getting from point A to point B, tonight I'm going to share a little bit about my background in education, my work experience along the way, and the skills that I acquired on my journey. And then I'm going to talk about cybersecurity and some of the work that my team does here at the college, and some of the career possibilities if it's something that you might be considering, either starting your career or making a transition as I did. Next slide. So when I was a young person and getting into high school, I thought the path to a career was, pretty straightforward. You're in high school, you're developing your interests, your strengths, you're deciding what you want to be when you grow up, so to speak. And then you go to college and you declare a major, maybe you find a specialty, and then you launch your career, your real job, and get into the work world. Next slide. So for me, that looked like this. I developed a significant passion for the theater in high school. I got to Towson University, where I declared my major in technical theater and design, and I'll talk a little bit about how I got to the technical theater side. And my aspiration was to move to New York City and be a lighting designer on Broadway. Next slide. So my path was not exactly that straight. There were a lot of twists and turns along the way. And of course, I didn't end up in New York City, although I love visiting there. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about that pathway. Next slide. So what sparked my journey and getting started in theater? As a young person, I was very interested in music. I took piano lessons. I played in the middle school band. I played clarinet and bass clarinet. So I loved music. And then there was a moment, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but my parents took my brother and me to our first Broadway show in New York, and we saw the Pirates of Penzance. It was a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, and it was so much fun. And I was kind of bitten by the idea of musical theater, particularly. So at summer camp, and I was around probably the middle school age, I auditioned for Carousel, which is a musical by Rodgers and Hammerstein, and I was cast in the chorus. And I just was one of the community members in the show, and I just had a great time. And so in my middle school, did a production of Oliver, which is a musical based on the Oliver Twist story. And I actually was cast as one of the lead men. That age, there weren't a lot of boys that wanted to do a theater. So I was cast as Fagin. He was the character that led the kind of band of boys that Oliver gets involved with. And I had to sing a lot of songs, and I was on stage quite a bit. And I had a beard with, this stuff called spirit gum that you'd stick on there. It was pretty gross. But it was just, I was on cloud nine. And then I asked my parents, I said, can I take voice lessons? Because I really wanted to, move in this direction. I was thinking I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to do musical theater. Next slide. So as I said, middle school, academically wasn't my strongest area. I had a few struggles getting my rhythm. But by the time I got to high school, I think I hit my academic stride. I was in the Honor Society. I took advanced placement classes, and I was on the college track. Next slide. So at the same time as I'm pursuing my academic side in high school, I was a member of the drama club. I joined the International Thespian Society, which is like a sorority or fraternity for theater geeks, of which I was one. And I pursued acting and singing, and I continued to audition, but I found myself only getting the small parts, right? The chorus or a walk-on role, that kind of thing. But I didn't let that stop me. I wanted to be part of the action. So I did anything that anybody asked. I would work on sets, build props, work on the lights. I even turned pages for the piano player, the music during a musical show, just to be there. I even took a stab at writing a play. We had a one-act play festival in high school, and I wrote one and entered it in, and it was performed. It was cool. Next slide. So when I was getting my feet wet with lighting, they used to bring in who we called the lighting guy, right? He didn't work at the high school, but they brought him in just to do the shows. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he's taught me everything there was to know about theater lighting design. So I learned about the lighting instruments. I learned about the gels, the color filters that go in front of the lights to cast the different colors onto the stage, how to create focus and mood on the stage, how different angles of light would change the mood. And then, of course, all that comes together into a lighting board where you're creating the light levels and the scene changes, and that's a lot of the art that goes with it. Next slide. So by the time I finished high school, I knew pretty much everything there was to know about lighting design, but I hadn't really I was able to help in high school, but I hadn't done it myself. But I knew that you create the basic light plot, which is that graphic representation in the middle of this slide here about where the lights are hung and the pipes that are above the stage. Then how to focus them on the stage, how to patch them into the panel that it attaches to the dimmers and then attaches to the channels in the light board, and you make those transitions. Next slide. But then to have a realized design after all that work was pretty amazing. So that was definitely going to be my focus. Next slide. So I'm going to stop here for a minute, and I'm going to talk about knowledge, skills, and abilities, because these are the key attributes that employers are looking for when they're hiring to determine if you're going to be successful as a candidate in the role that they're hiring for. And as a hiring manager myself, I use these as well. So we're talking about knowledge. They're also called KSAs. So knowledge is your understanding of a particular subject area. Skills are the proficiencies you've developed in your training and experience, and those abilities and your capabilities to perform the work. So throughout my journey in my talk today, I'm going to talk about the KSAs that I acquired at each stage of this journey that allowed me to make different transitions in my career. Next slide. So in high school, I think I started collecting these KSAs pretty early. So in high school, I credit my beginning to be a good writer and having that skill to really be a good communicator. And I think that is a critical skill that people need in every aspect and every phase of any career. I look for that when I'm hiring folks. And then perseverance, never giving up, that idea that, okay, so I'm in the chorus, but I'm still going to be part of the show. And that adaptability, making adjustments along the way, becoming an expert in lighting. So because I couldn't do the things I thought I wanted to do. Next slide. So I finished high school and I got to college. And as I said earlier, I didn't even wait for classes to start. I moved into my dorm and I walked over to the College of Fine Arts and I declared my major. So you can see now I ended up in technical theater and design because I was not going to be an actor, although I had to take acting as a requirement for all theater majors. I got a job in the scene shop in the theater at Towson, just so I would get that hands-on experience outside the classroom and understand what it was to build a production. I built sets, I hung lights, I built props, I painted drops, whatever there was to do. And the great thing about being at Towson was even as an undergrad, I had the opportunity to design sets and lights for realized productions. Some schools only let graduate students do that. So that was one of the choices I made. And then on my before I left in my senior year, I did get to audition to get it out of my system. I auditioned for another Gilbert and Sullivan show called HMS Pinafore, and I was in the chorus. And that's actually a picture of me in my costume, full makeup. And I was happy as can be, as you can see. Next slide. So as I was looking back and preparing for this talk, I wanted to share some of my designs because I was proud of them. And looking back, it was fun to see the work that I had done. So one of the shows I designed sets and lights for was a one-act play called Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All for You by Christopher Durang. This was a satirical look at Catholic school education. So the top picture there is a watercolor rendering that I did to depict what the set would look like before we actually built it. And it was sort of a way to communicate to the director, does this meet your vision, that kind of thing. And then the picture below is an actual picture from the production, and you can see the similarities there. Next slide. And then the summer before my senior year, I had my first paid gig. I was a professional lighting designer for this production of The Belle of Amherst by William Luce at the Maryland Arts Festival, which was a summer theater festival hosted at Towson. And the show starred Maravine Lushke. She was the theater department chair there at the time. And she later went on to be the Dean of Fine Arts and then the president of Towson. So it was a privilege to work with her. It was a one-woman show that depicted the life of Emily Dickinson, the poet, and it was about her life and her poetry. And then I had another opportunity to work with her because she directed the next show that's depicted here called Running Gag by Megan Terry and Joanne Schmidman. And this was a feminist theater piece. It actually had before we did it at Towson, it debuted at the Lake Placid Olympics, if you remember it. Well, a lot of you are probably too young, but it's 1980. The show depicts women's struggle for independence, but it also was a demonstration. The reason they just debuted it at the Olympics was a demonstration about how actors are also athletes. So the show's called Running Gag. It was a 75-minute show and no intermission, and the actors run the entire time. It's really a unique production. And you'll see from the picture there that the set was very minimal. So the lighting was very key. And in both of these cases, I actually got positive reviews in the local paper. Usually with lighting design, you don't want to be mentioned because people mention it, it means there's something wrong. You know, you don't really notice it as an audience member. But in this case, the first one, there were a lot of flashback scenes for Emily Dickinson. So the lighting helped create that difference between the present and the past. And then with the Running Gag, it was about creating space for the actors. So it was kind of cool. Next slide. So after college, I wanted to get more professional experience. So I looked for an internship and I found the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut. You see this beautiful building on the banks of the Connecticut River. And if you know the show Annie, before it moved to Broadway, this is where it was born at Goodspeed. So I thought it had a great reputation. It's focused only on musical theater, which of course is my love. And so I applied for an internship, a lighting internship, and I got it there and moved there for almost a year. Next slide. So while I was at the Goodspeed, I had the opportunity to hang lights, focus lights for the lighting designers, and I ran the follow spot for 2 productions. One was Pal Joey and the other was Bells Are Ringing. Goodspeed Opera House often revives old musicals, reproduces them, and takes a new spin on them. So these are older ones. That picture where it says hang there, that's me hanging from what's called a bosun's chair, which is a chair that's suspended from a pipe that you can slide up and down the pipe and deal with the lights there. I was also on ladders a lot, got rid of my fear of heights pretty quickly. Used to have a crescent wrench attached to like a phone cord, like a bungee cord, and you hook it to you, because if you're up there, you don't want, if you drop it, you don't want to have to go back down and get it, and you certainly don't want to hit anyone in the head with it. And so it was a great professional experience. I was there for almost a year, and not only was it a great professional experience, but it was a great personal experience because I met some of my best friends who are still my friends today, and this is some of them at that time. Next slide. All right, so going back to our KSAs, I think between college and my internship, I acquired another several skills that have come in handy along the way. Obviously, as an artist or a creative person, creativity sort of comes with the territory, but collaboration, you cannot mount a theater production without collaborating with a whole lot of people, from the director to the other designers, to the performers, to the stage managers, to the crew. It's a collaborative effort. And I think I also developed a strong work ethic. Indeed.com defines a work ethic as an attitude of determination and dedication towards one's job. And these are exhibited by the qualities that I have listed here: reliability, dedication, discipline, productivity, cooperation, integrity, responsibility, and professionalism. And I carry those with me today. Next slide. All right, so I finished my internship and I've learned a lot about what it means to work in the theater, and I have the decision to make. Am I going to stay in the theater, or am I going to get a real job? So there's a lot of uncertainty in the theater. Even if you're successful, like I worked with, they actually brought in Broadway designers to do shows at the Goodspeed. And so they're successful working designers, but yet they still have to move from place to place to place to get the next job, because unless you're a resident somewhere at a particular theater, the jobs don't, you have to move. You have to, unless you could stay in New York City and there's a lot of choices, but you might be going to regional theaters all over the United States or around the world. So as a young professional moving into this area, I was a little bit daunted by that prospect. And then I also heard in the back of my head my dad saying, "You need health insurance. You need health insurance." And back then, you couldn't stay on your parents' health insurance till you're 26 like you can today. So I think that was a factor in moving in a different direction. And then those friends that were in that picture, there were 4 of us, and only one of them is still working in theater today. And ironically, he's working in higher ed. So, and so he's resident at his university. Okay, next slide. So while I was at the Goodspeed, I learned about a new graduate program at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in architectural lighting. And I was familiar with RPI because my dad went there. He got both his bachelor's and graduate degrees in electrical engineering. It was a school known for science and engineering programs. So I was like, I don't know how this fits in, but it was brand new and I was intrigued. And I thought, how can I transition my theater lighting experience to this new world of architectural lighting? So I learned that one of the faculty there, his name was Howard Branston, got his start in theater lighting. And he actually, that picture of the Statue of Liberty there, he actually designed the lighting for the Statue of Liberty when it was renovated in the 80s. And I was really intrigued by this. So I gave him a call and I explained my background and I asked him if he thought I would be successful in this science-based lighting program. And he thought yes. He said, he made that transition, so he thought I should give it a try. So just to give you an indication of the science piece and the STEM side of lighting, I had to take calculus to even apply. So I enrolled at my local community college and I took calculus and then I applied. And not only did I get in, but I got a full scholarship. I think that it was a brand new program, as I said, and I think they were really interested in balancing the science and engineering candidates with someone with an artistic background. So I thought, how can I pass this opportunity up? So I moved up to, this was in Troy, New York, and I moved up there and started the program. As I said, it was a small program. The first year only had 2 students, and then I was in the second class and there were 8 of us. So it was very intensive, very tight-knit group, but a lot of science. And I suffered that first semester with physics of light. And I kept saying to myself, if I can just get through this first semester, I'll be okay. And I got through it. So I started the second semester so excited to start with the design classes, and Mr. Branston, Professor Branston, well, he was incredibly intimidating and he singled me out as the artistic one and set me up for, as an example to my colleagues. And it was a lot of pressure. And I was a young person and I just had a really hard time with it. I was not prepared. And so I consulted with my parents and we decided it was okay to say, let's back out of this and come home. So I made that change and it was very difficult, but it was the right thing for me at the time. Next slide. All right, so looking again, checking in on our KSAs, I think although I didn't finish my program, I definitely honed some of my critical thinking skills, which again is something that is so important, and especially as we talk later in cybersecurity, to have those skills to absorb information, to ask questions, not take things at face value, and to make educated judgment is so important. And then resilience. Like I said, I felt a little bit like a failure by not finishing that program, but I realized that it was a learning opportunity and it really opened the door for other things to come. Next slide. All right, so I'm home again and I'm figuring, what am I going to do with myself? So while I was figuring out what to do, I signed up with a temp agency and I basically took any job they could offer me. And I found myself doing a stint as a claims clerk at a small health insurance company. And it was my first office job. I'd been in theater all this time. And I got the idea of what it means to work a 9-to-5 situation. I had colleagues, coworkers, and at that particular job, I lasted, I don't think it was a full year, but a decent amount of time. I got to know my coworkers and it was a good experience. I also had an opportunity to do some telemarketing. Can't say that that was my favorite thing. And sometimes I think it's important to know what you don't like as much as you finding what you do like. So that was definitely off the list. And while I was doing these jobs, I was always looking in the want ads. This is back in the day that you looked in the paper. And I saw an ad for Sutton Place Gourmet. Well, if you noticed on those earlier slides, my maiden name is Sutton. And I thought, I like food. It's a retail grocery. It was a gourmet grocery store. I like food. I have no retail experience, but my name's Sutton and they have to give me an interview. So I applied with a creative cover letter and I got an interview and I was hired as a sales associate in the cheese department. Next slide. Oh, wait, no, let's go back again. Sorry, Eduardo. So working at Sutton Place was great. First of all, they let you taste everything because they want you to talk to the customers. So it was fabulous if you like food. So I really expanded my palate during the year that I was there. And then shortly after I started, the manager of the cheese department left the store and I got promoted to manager. And each department was run like a small business. So you were responsible for the ordering. I was responsible for the pricing. I had to meet certain revenue and profit goals. And so I could make the decisions on how to do that. I supervised my own staff. It was a real great entry into the business world. But I had to work 7 days a week, not necessarily 7 days in a row, but I mean, the store was open 7 days and you had to work shifts because some people worked, the store was open from early morning to 10 o'clock at night. And so it was back to my theater world, right? I'm working all kinds of odd hours. And after a year and always on my feet, I thought I need to look for something else. All right, next slide, Eduardo. Thank you. So KSA pause here. Again, customer service. They let you taste all the food so that you can talk to the customers about it and understand where they're coming from, what party are they planning, who's going to be there, all that kind of thing. Being able to talk freely with people. Accountability. I was running my business. I had to make sure that I met those goals. It was on me to do that. And personnel management. It's the first time I had an opportunity to supervise people. And that definitely opened the door to some other things in the future. Okay, next slide. All right, so what was I going to do after Sutton Place? So I started to look at nonprofit organizations. I like the idea of working for a mission-driven organization, and now National Museum of Women in the Arts sort of fit the bill. But at the same time, they had an ad for an exhibition design intern. So again, I'm thinking, wow, maybe I can apply my lighting design again to transition here. So I applied. Well, I found out they had already filled the position, but they liked my resume enough to say, would you like to be a public relations intern? And I thought, well, why not? I mean, it's a museum with art, and it kind of, goes with my vibe. And I thought, okay. So I did that for several months and got to promote. I don't know if you're familiar with the National Museum of Women in the Arts, but it's in Washington, D.C. It's located at 13th Street and New York Avenue Northwest. It houses all women artists and promotes women artists. And part of my public relations stint was bringing that attention to those women who were often left out of the conversation when you talk about the classic artists, right, that are men. So I did that work for a bit, and then I got a permanent job as a special events coordinator. And if you see from that picture there, it had a beautiful great hall, has a beautiful great hall that would lend itself to corporate parties, weddings, all kinds of parties. And so I would help book those events and then work those events during the event. Caterers would come in and all that kind of stuff. And again, I found myself, I'm attracted to these jobs with odd hours. So, parties are at night. And so you're working all kinds of crazy hours and on your feet all the time. And I thought, okay, I'm ready for something else, but I didn't want to leave the museum. So I moved over to the fundraising office, the development office, and I became a development coordinator, working with donors and constituents and visitors and trying to raise money for the museum. And again, just much like the Goodspeed, this was a great professional experience, but also a personal experience. And the two women next to me in that picture down at the bottom are still very close friends today. I'm very fortunate. All right, next slide. So I was at the museum for 3 years, I think, total. And I made a transition to Jewish Women International, another nonprofit mission-driven organization. I again had another personal connection here. My mom was a longtime life member of the organization and was on their board of directors for a period of time. And so I was familiar with the organization. When I joined, they were approaching their 100th anniversary, and they had started as a local chapter-based organization. And they were transitioning to being more national focused and focusing more on a specific mission of ending domestic violence, especially in the Jewish community. So as part of that, they focused on economic independence for women and financial empowerment, which goes hand in hand with preventing domestic violence. I was a program and marketing manager. And as part of their rebranding themselves, I helped create a new brand identity for them. I worked on a new website. I promoted the magazine that they had just launched. And I led a business process re-engineering project to help transition their systems from their legacy databases and such to a new database that would support the fundraising efforts and things like that. And if you'll see that I have there, you see the seeds of an IT career starting, which I didn't even realize at the time. Next slide. Okay, so checking in on KSAs again, from nonprofits, you have to be resourceful. You don't necessarily, money's not thrown at you. You have to, if you want to do a project, you have to fund it and you have to justify why you're spending the money. The same thing goes for here at the college as well. Customer service again, this time dealing with clients and donors and constituents. And then that technology, learning about databases, learning about websites. I got all that during my experience at those institutions. Next slide. All right, so at this point, I'm like, what are my next steps? How can I bring that great retail business experience that I had with and merge that with my nonprofit experience to help make a better organization? So I decided to go to business school and I applied to the Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. But this time, unlike my first graduate school experience, I decided to go part-time. So I wasn't going all in. I was keeping my routine, but I was going to school at night. And the other benefit to that was that my cohort of other students were also doing the same thing. And I got to meet a lot of people from a lot of different professional backgrounds, which was a great opportunity. So I say the three things that I took away from my, and I focused on marketing and management. That's what I was doing at JWI. So the three things I think that I took away from my business school experience were teamwork. Every project was a team effort. Either you had a team of 2 or a team of 5, maybe. And you had to work together and you had to find out quickly how to collaborate and how to make your project a success because there wasn't a lot of time to turn these assignments around. And then presentation, I had to stand up and present my project with my team in front of the whole class. I don't think there was any project that you just turned in a paper. You had to present. So getting up in front of people like I am today, talking in front of people was a great experience. And then networking, building relationships with my professors, with my colleagues in school, which ended up opening doors, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Next slide. All right, I think this is my last KSA slide. So graduate school offered me an opportunity to look at organizational development and management, finance, human resources, all the pieces that make up how an organization works. And then, as I mentioned, teamwork, presentation, and networking are key skills that I carry with me today. Next slide. All right, so that brings us to information technology. And I have to say it's a journey in and of itself. So how did I get here? How did I make that leap? Well, a friend of mine in business school said, she's looking at me, she's like, you're majoring in marketing. She goes, oh, you should be an analyst. I'm like, what's an analyst? I don't even know what one is. Well, an IT analyst can be many things, but I think one of the ones you boiled down to is to be able to translate business requirements into solutions that are brought by technology. And so that's how it started for me. At some point, I started an analyst, I moved into mid-level management, and then I transitioned to cybersecurity. And so I'll talk about all of those things. Next slide. So my first job with that same person who recognized that in me, that I had the ability to be an analyst, suggested that I might start as a software tester. So as a software tester, it's a great foot in the door for IT because you don't necessarily need any specific technology experience because you're acting like a user. You're just using the software as a user would who doesn't know anything about how it works. I got a job at Windstar, was a small telecom company, on their billing system. And I designed tests to ensure that those business requirements were being met within the software and that it functioned as designed. So my job was to just identify those bugs and defects. It was kind of fun. You get to point out what other people did wrong. But the cool thing about being at that organization was it was a very collaborative team. And as a tester, I got to sit with the developers when I found a bug and show them exactly what I did. And come on in. And I got to learn about this application was on an Oracle database backend. And so I got to learn about Oracle databases and how they worked, which was a benefit to me because I don't think that's true everywhere, but I got some further exposure to those technologies that will later come in handy for me. I had another sort of pivotal moment at WinStar because they had some financial troubles and a bunch of us got laid off. They eventually went out of business. And it was sort of traumatic to find yourself without a job. But I was fortunate again with connections and networking that I made a transition to Verizon. Thank you, Verizon. And they were using the same billing software. And so I was able to make that leap. In fact, I think 2 or 3 of us ended up at Verizon that were working at WinStar. Next slide. So that's what brought me to Montgomery College. There was an ad for a position as an Oracle DBA and database services manager. While I was at Verizon, they paid for me to get certified as an Oracle database administrator. So I had that experience and I was able to make that transition here at the college. It was a management position, so I was not only doing hands-on database work, but I was also supervising the database team. And our team was responsible for all of the enterprise applications with an Oracle backend. If you've ever taken a class here at the college and you registered, you were using the Banner system, and the Banner system is built on Oracle. And so that's one of the major ones that I supported. And if you're a student and you've put your information into that system, then you know that we have all of your personal information. And so it became clear pretty quickly that we had to figure out how best to protect that information. Next slide. So I partnered with my colleague at the time, who was the manager of the information security group, to identify strategies to protect personally identifiable information, otherwise known as PII. And so we worked together, and he suggested that I get certified as a CISSP. It's from ISC Squared, is the organization that sponsors it. It's a certified information systems security professional. It's an intensive management certification, requires 5 years of experience in 2 of the 8 domains of the Common Book of Knowledge, as it's called. That I have those listed below here. And then you have to pass a 6-hour exam. And it's not 6 hours anymore, because with the different computer technologies now, it's one of those things you get a question right, it moves you to it a different way. But at the time, you had to take every question. So 6 hours. And I was like, how am I going to study for this? Because it's pretty intensive. But the college offers an incredible benefit called professional development leave. And if you've been at the college for 3 years, you can apply and you can get 3 months or a semester to leave your job and go do something, a special project or finish a degree or something like that. So I was fortunate to be awarded this opportunity, and I took 3 months off to study for the exam and pass it, thank goodness. And I'm now a CISSP. So that was back in 2013. So I'm still with the database group. Next slide. Oh, I promised, I thought it was my last KSA slide. I'm sorry, it's not. So obviously IT, I mean, I've acquired a lot of skills since 2013, 2004, really, when I started at the college. But now I know a lot about IT operations and supporting applications and production systems. I'm worked on multiple operating systems. I am now familiar with data protection strategies and operating of networks. And obviously I have some supervisory and management experience. So you can see that if you look at the whole slide here, since we started this discussion, I've acquired a whole portfolio of knowledge, skills, and abilities. Next slide. All right, so now my colleague that I mentioned, who is running the IT security group, he decided to take a position on the academic side of the house, and that position became open. And with my new certification, it was an easy slide for me to move over to manage that group. So I have been fortunate since 2015 to manage the best team at the college. They're made up of 2 cyber defense analysts, 3 cyber defense infrastructure engineers and an architect, and a cyber risk analyst. Next slide. So to talk a little bit about what my team does, I divided it into these 3 areas: oversight and development, protect and defend, and security operations. And I'll talk about how each of these functions support what we call the triad of cybersecurity, and that's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality is the protecting data from disclosure. Integrity is protecting data from alteration. And availability is making sure that that data is available and your systems are available to users when they need it. Next slide. So we'll take the first one first, oversight and development. So first we do program management. So we have the IT security function has a program that we've developed for the college, which involves strategic planning and budget planning, making sure we can do what we intend to do. And then the program itself is made up of a group of policies, standards, and processes that support the function of cybersecurity. Risk management is a huge part of my work. We're constantly doing risk assessments to identify gaps that need to be addressed. Compliance, there's a lot of regulatory compliance by federal and state regulators that the college is subject to, and we want to make sure we're compliant. And also with our own policies, we do internal sort of audits of making sure that we're doing what we say we're doing. And then lately, there's been a big focus on third-party risk. The college doesn't develop its own applications in a large way. We mostly buy software, or we have a subscription to a cloud service. So we have to evaluate all of those third parties to make sure they're protecting the data as if we were protecting it ourselves. And then finally, we have an education and training program. All employees at the college are required to take an annual cybersecurity hygiene class. It's not a physical class, it's an online set of modules that they have to take. And then we phish our employees as well. If you're familiar with phishing, that's some malicious emails. And so we send malicious emails on a regular basis to all our employees to help practice identifying those suspicious emails, because that's a very common inroad into by bad actors into organizations. And then we have a new hire orientation program where we're on the agenda. If you just started the college, your very first day, you're spent in meetings learning about benefits and all that kind of thing. We have a section on that agenda, so people start on the right foot of a cybersecurity culture, if you will. Next slide. Then there's protect and defend. So cyber defense analysis for our team is made up of email security, again, those phishing, preventing phishing attacks and such, access control, making sure people have access to what they need and only what they need, privilege management is on the same vein, and the principle of least privilege, meaning you should only have access to do what you need to do for your job and not anything more than that. And then user endpoint security, antivirus, things you would have on your computer at home. We want to make sure that we're doing that at the college as well. Cyber defense infrastructure engineering, that's your network security, your firewalls, load balancers, hardware appliances, things like that. Server endpoint security, similar to your user endpoint security, we have to protect our servers as well. Application security in the form of web application firewalls to protect internet-facing applications, and then redundancy, and that goes to that availability piece of this triad I talked about. You want to make sure if something, whether it's because of a malicious act or an incident, or if it's just a disk drive failure or some kind of hardware failure, you want to make sure that your systems are redundant enough that your application's still available even when you have a problem. And then incident response, this is a 4-phased approach to protecting against cyber bad actors. The first phase is preparation, and that's making sure that you have a plan and you're prepared to respond to any bad event that happens. The next phase is that detection and analysis, making sure you are aware when something bad happens and understanding how it happened. Containment, containing the incident, removing it from your environment, and then recovering so you can bring your systems back up. And then the last phase is the post-incident activities, which are lessons learned, basically, looking back at the analysis of your event and seeing, did your plan meet everything you needed to do, and then adjusting your plan and starting the whole process over with preparation again. Next slide. Oh, sorry, no. It looks similar, but it's a different one. There we go. Security operations, vulnerability management. So these are additional functions that my analysts and engineers undertake. vulnerability management is we scan our network and devices on a regular basis, looking for those weaknesses, looking for those gaps so we can address them. Penetration testing is where you take the position of being a bad actor and simulating that, trying to exploit the weaknesses. It's better for you to find those weaknesses than for the bad guy to find them. And then assessing those vulnerabilities to decide what should take priority to remediate. It's hard to do it all at once. And then the remediation itself and the mitigating those risks. Detection and response is the threat management and sometimes threat hunting, looking for those indicators of compromise to see if you have had an incident or event in your environment. And that goes with logging and monitoring. So all our systems are logged, and we review those logs to make sure, again, looking for those indicators of compromise, or in the case of an incident, maybe we're looking back at logs for evidence of something that happened. And I have incident response listed twice here because incident response is an all hands on deck activity. It doesn't matter what area you specialize in, and you might not even be in IT security, but you're going to jump in on this when we have an incident. Next slide. Okay, so now I am a college administrator, the Chief Information Security Officer. I got this role and moved up from being the IT security manager because my predecessor, the CISO before me, recognized that this was the next step for me in my journey. And he was getting ready to retire. So with his encouragement and his guidance, he prepared me for that next step. So he retired in July 2021, and we had a bit of a leadership transition, and I took the role as interim to start, and I did that for a year, and then I moved into the position permanently last year, as Kimberly mentioned earlier. And the difference between being a manager of a team and being the administrator of the same team, for me, is the difference between operational work and strategic work, and also taking that business view. So I've always worked at the college. I've always appreciated the mission, but now as an administrator, I feel more responsible for that mission and how the work we do supports that effort to see students through the transitions in their lives. Next slide. So as the CISO, that's the Chief Information Security Officer term, I'm responsible for establishing and maintaining the enterprise vision and strategy and program to ensure that information assets are protected at the college. And these are some of the knowledge, skills, and abilities for the CISO position that are outlined by the NICE workforce framework. NICE is the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. It's a subset or a department under NIST. And so they established for a whole lot of cybersecurity jobs. They have a whole, you can go look up all these knowledge, skills, and abilities, which is why I spent so much time talking about those things, because those are how you can know if a job might be a good fit for you and your skill set. So you can see, I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can see that critical thinking, communicating, collaborating, all of those things appear here, in addition to the knowledge that I've gained in my experience in IT. Next slide. So again, the NICE framework is divided into these 7 sections, and you can recognize some of the names that our work at the colleges that we labeled. But this is how they divide up the different types of jobs that are available. And with 7 areas, there's quite a number of opportunities. Next slide. So I'm going to walk through several different career possibilities and profiles of those job titles, and talk about a little bit about what knowledge, skills, and abilities are required. And this is a resource. This one's from CISA, and there's a whole lot out there, and I'll talk about resources at the end, but this is where these come from. So next slide. So this first one is a systems testing and evaluation specialist. This is very much like the software tester position that I first had when I made the transition to IT. No degree required, although for all these positions, even if a degree isn't required, it's always a good thing to have. But if you look in the bottom left corner here, it talks about the soft skills. So planning and organization, problem solving, systems thinking, so that critical thinking again. that's really what we're going to focus on as we go through these, but this is one example. Next slide. Vulnerability assessment analyst. This is someone like on my team who runs vulnerability scans and looking for those gaps and doing the analysis on what's required. But if you look at those soft skills, we're talking about problem solving, being curious and creative, attention to detail, strong communication skills. The strong communication skills are going to serve you well in every one of these positions. Next slide. Cyber defense incident responder. So this is that incident response position. On my team, we all do this, but there are people who are incident responders. That's their primary job. And again, it's capable of handling stress. It is definitely a stressful situation when you have an event that you're about to have to deal with. Being flexible, problem solving, analytical skills, good communications. These are the basis of all of these positions. Next slide. Pen tester, this is a fun position. As I said, this is like the pretending to be that bad guy, trying to get into systems. Sometimes it's called white hat hacking. You're the good guy doing the bad things so that the bad guy doesn't get in. So again, those soft skills, ability to learn quickly, teamwork. I say teamwork is probably a skill necessary for all of these positions. Strong written and verbal communication. I guess, again, I said from the beginning and when I was in high school, you got to write. You got to be able to write. Next slide. Software developer. You might not think of software development as a particularly cyber related job, but really it is, because if you're designing systems with cyber in mind, then you don't have to bolt it on afterwards, and it's natively built in, and you're going to have a much more secure product. So if you're interested in software development, go in with a cyber mindset. Next slide. Cloud architect. In this day and age, we cannot get away without talking about cloud. There are, your Office 365 is a cloud application, Google, etc. If you want to be in on the ground floor of architecting systems that reside in the cloud, again, you need that cyber mindset, and then those soft skills again: creativity, creative thinking, collaboration. Next slide. Cyber forensics expert. So this is like the detective after an incident or during an incident that's looking back to see, how did this happen? Where did the malware come from? How did they get in? This is a very exciting job. Again, stressful, but if you have curiosity and strong communication skills, and this is something that interests you, this is a great position to be in. If you are in this type of position and you're in covering an incident that the bad guys have, it's possible to actually catch them and it goes to court, then you might have to testify. So it's definitely an exciting type of position. Next slide. Cybersecurity engineer. These are much like the folks that work for me, who are responsible for the infrastructure and hardware appliances like load balancers and firewalls to protect our infrastructure. And again, same soft skills. There's a theme here. And so I'm just giving you a bird's eye view. Next slide. If you're interested in math, encryption might be something that you could go for. This is not my area of expertise. I rely on others for this, but encryption is used for the two legs of the triad, the confidentiality and the integrity. Confidentiality, encrypting something to protect it from being disclosed when you don't want it to. And integrity, you can apply a hash to a file or another piece of information. And if that hash hasn't changed, nothing's changed in that file, because a bad guy can come in and manipulate that data. So encryption is very handy, but it's definitely a specialization. Next slide. Information systems security manager. So this is like the management position that I held previously. This is an operational position that you're overseeing the security operations for an institution. Strong leadership skills, good communication, creative problem solving, collaboration. Next slide. And the Chief Information Security Officer. So that brings us full circle. This is the job that I have, again, taking that business view, being the more strategic thinker and planning for that program, and making sure that we're meeting our compliance objectives, et cetera. So again, leadership, excellent communication skills, analytical thinking, and a strong knowledge base of cybersecurity. Next slide. So these profile slides came from, I think it's the fourth one down, cyber.org, but it was a collaborative effort with a lot of these different organizations, including the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, which is the federal cybersecurity agency, NIST, of course, women in cybersecurity. 10 years ago or so, women only made up 11% of the cyber workforce, and we've more than doubled that now, but we're still only at 25%. So there's a lot of room for women in this industry. And of course, there's a lot of positions available, too many, not enough people. So the reason I focused on the soft skills here in this talk tonight is because as you're making career transitions, the hiring managers are also making transitions because we can't find the ideal candidate necessarily. So we want to look for people with those aptitudes that can make those transitions. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Montgomery College has its own cybersecurity program. So we offer an associate's degree in cybersecurity, and we also offer certificate programs in network security. Next slide. So in reviewing how I got from point A to point B, I think that I credit these three things. Mentors, those people who see things in you that you didn't necessarily see in yourself. That lighting guy took me under his wing back in high school. My business school colleague who saw the analyst in me. My MC colleague who encouraged my cybersecurity instincts. And then my former boss who saw that I could move into this leadership position. And I try to be a mentor to those to others that I encounter. And then preparedness, investing in myself and my education, positioning myself to be ready for any opportunity that comes along. And then obviously when an opportunity does come along, being open to it so that you can take advantage, being armed with those KSAs so you can walk into a new position. Next slide. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share my story from moving from artist to analyst to administrator. And I was happy to be here tonight. Thank you, Kimberly.
Wow, thank you, Nell. That's amazing. I mean, this presentation, you laid it out very nicely. I mean, you covered everything, your journey, but also those pearls of wisdom. What do you really need to be, make the progress that you made in your career that can be applicable to anybody? So thank you for that. This is my favorite part of the program, besides our guest speakers, are the question and answers. I mean, we've had really rich discussions, and this is a discussion, right? It's not just a question and answer. So we're a community of learners here, so I encourage you to ask questions. For Nell, I know we've also had discussions among each other too, so feel free to do that. For those of us that are joining us online, please put your questions in the chat. I have my iPad over here, so I'll be able to field those for you. So I already saw one hand up. I see Raj has a question, so I'm going to bring the mic over here.
Thank you very much. Very interesting journey. Just fascinating. I was talking to a couple of people. By the way, Grace, she's a recruiter as well. So she shared some information with us. She was talking about storytelling. So my question to you is, some candidates may be able to do the job, but may not be able to do well in an interview for whatever the reason may be. So how do you address that? Or would you be willing to give opportunities to those candidates? And also, what do you think the candidates should do to get better at interviewing?
That is a terrific question. It is a challenge. I don't think everyone's natural ability is interviewing. I think my best advice is to practice. I think there's some apps now that actually you can simulate an interview and get some feedback if you don't have someone to do it for a friend or a colleague. But I think we underestimate what it takes to be comfortable in those situations, and I don't think there's any shame in practicing. Much like I prepared for this presentation today, I didn't just walk in and do it. I spent a lot of time on it. So I don't have any magic, there's no silver bullet. But I think telling, and you mentioned storytelling, I think if you have a story to tell, practicing showing how you think your knowledge, skills, and abilities can be applied to the particular position, tailor your resume to that. Don't just do a generic resume, apply for the job that you want, and then practice those interview skills. I think that's my best advice.
Thank you. We have a question. Well, we have two questions in the chat. The first one is, did you have any roadblocks when transitioning to new careers? I'm transitioning careers now, and a lot of people only see me as being able to do my former job.
I don't remember having a particular roadblock per se, but I understand the your challenge in having people see you in a different light. I think it's very similar to my last advice, is to figure out the story you want to tell about how you think that what you've been doing can translate to the new thing you want to do. And then practice. But I think that knowing that you believe that you can do what is required will go a long way to being able to tell a hiring manager that you have that ability.
Thank you. Next question is, well, first it starts with a statement. You are amazing. I started out in theater and I am evolving on your path. What was your defining moment?
Wow. I think I had many defining moments based on my story. But we never stop evolving. And so at each point in time, I think that you deal with what's in front of you. And so for me, looking back, I've always had the philosophy of everything happens for a reason. And so for me, looking back at every step of my journey, it was the right thing to do, even though if it might have been stressful at the time. So I hope that answers the question.
Oh, all right. Here's a question from Eduardo.
I do have a question. First of all, full disclosure, I have worked for Nell and with Nell before, and I have the highest respect for you. But my question here is, you talk a lot about those transferable skills, and when I was also working with the cybersecurity program, I have a lot of young people coming to me and trying, what do I need to get into cybersecurity? And they tend to focus a lot on the technical skills. But I think that you made a great point about those transferable skills. And how well have they served you in your career? And you mentioned a few, but which ones you think that the young people should be concentrated on as much as on their technical skills, those KSAs? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I said this a few times, but writing, being able to communicate in writing and verbally, and then critical thinking. I really think to not question, you have to be able to question what's in front of you, especially in cybersecurity, because you're presented with a lot of information. And if you don't question what's being presented, think of it like the bad actor who's sending you a phishing email, and they're assuming you're not going to ask any questions. They're just appealing to your worst instincts, right? Your account's going to be cut off. You better call this number, or your account's going to be off. Click here on this link, and you need to stop and think. I mean, this is a basic example, but it's I think evident of it. And that is, do I know this company that's claiming they're do I have an account here? I mean, it's something basic like that. I always tell people, we tell people in our new hire orientation, separate your business account from your personal account. If you have an account at work, don't have your personal stuff come there, because then if you get a thing from Amazon at your work account, but you don't use your work email for Amazon, I shouldn't be clicking on here, that kind of thing. So that critical thinking and not taking things at face value, I think, is invaluable.
Any questions here? Yes, Raj, here I come.
Because my background is IT. A lot of companies ask for experience. This is a major challenge for some candidates. I was talking to a couple of people and they decided to drop out of the program, cybersecurity program, because companies are asking for experience. And so I was talking to Grace as well earlier. So what are your suggestions regarding that? It's like a chicken and egg problem.
You know, it is, and I don't have the I don't have as much flexibility as I would like as a hiring manager to see past the experience question. We're still trying to overcome that. It's just that cybersecurity is we're in a unique position, and that there's, like I said, more open positions than there are people. So in an ideal world, when you're putting together a position description and you're listing those KSAs, you want the knowledge, you want the skills, and you want the abilities, and you want the experience. I mean, you want that. If I want the perfect candidate, but we have to come to the realization that there aren't any perfect candidates right now. It's very difficult, but each organization has to make those choices, and we're still working on that at the college. But I think for an individual who's looking to get those experiences, internships are one way to do it. Get your foot in the door with someone who's willing to take you on as an intern to get that experience. What else? That's a good question. I don't know the answer specifically. The question was, are cybersecurity students who graduate from Montgomery College getting hired? I don't know the answer to that question, but I will say that as valuable as a cybersecurity degree is, I think focusing more on the broad IT experience is very valuable. You don't have to have the cyber experience. You don't have to have the cyber degree. I don't want to minimize what the college is offering, but I think, like me, here I started as a tester, and then I moved slowly through my IT experience, and I was able to then apply it to cybersecurity. You don't necessarily have to walk in with a degree in cybersecurity to be successful in cybersecurity. But that being said, I think a cybersecurity degree that allows you to focus on those basic skills in understanding operating systems, understanding networks. And the one thing I didn't talk about in the profile, because I just didn't happen to find a profile for it, is the compliance side. There's a whole policy building, writing that's not technical. You still have to have appreciation and understanding of the technical controls, but you don't necessarily have to be the hands-on programmer type or the one doing the firewall policies and things like that. Talking about those administrative controls that also contribute to a successful cybersecurity program. I hope that helps.
Thanks. We have a couple of statements and questions in the chat. The first one is great presentation and career. Thanks for sharing it with us. For interview prep, MWE gives access to BG Interview, a great AI-powered interview prep tool and site. So there's some information. Next question is, any suggestions for getting an entry-level help desk position with experience in customer service?
I think that's a great entry point. I don't have any specific tips on how to get one of those jobs, but I definitely think if you find a pathway into a help desk or service desk position, I think that's a great way to learn about all the different applications that an organization's supporting and that the users are using. And I think it's another great, just like the software tester role, I think that's also a great foothold in.
I'm just going to expand. I'll come to you. I'm going to expand on that question, and maybe this is what the guest is getting at. What are the transferable skills from customer service to help desk?
I mean, like a generic customer, oh, just in general. Okay. Well, obviously, if you're dealing with someone, if you're a service desk analyst, and users calling in for assistance, patience, and understanding, putting yourself where that person is so that you can really empathize with them. I think that goes a long way. And then once you've gained that, if you have those skills to bring to a service desk, they have what's called knowledge base that gives you all the answers basically. So again, you don't necessarily have to have the hands-on experience of, we're supporting Banner here at the college. You don't have to have known Banner ahead of time. You just have to be trained when you get in on these are the typical calls we get. This is what users are experiencing. And then you'll be using those systems too as you're supporting them, and you'll be able to gain that additional experience and then be able to transition to other things as well.
I'm going to take the last question here, and then we have one here in the hub. It's a two-part question. I can answer number two, actually. Are there any free courses we can take advantage of or websites you could suggest? That was the first question. Second one is, will we get a copy of your slides if possible? Yes. Anybody who registered through Zoom, will send the link out, and we post all our videos that are recorded on our YouTube channel for the hub. So I'll turn the... You want me to go back? Are there any free courses we can take advantage of or websites you could suggest?
I think Eduardo, if you back to the resource page, there are some good resources here that have a lot of good information that I can't swear that they have links to free courses, but I'm going to bet they do. There's just so much online, and these are good places to start. Especially NIST and NICE are going to have great resources. The Women in Cybersecurity, the YSIS, I think it's called, the .org. They also have good resources. So I don't have any off the top of my head, but I would start with these.
The hub also partners with the Information Technology Institute here at the college, and the hub has sponsored free boot camps. So keep an eye out on our newsletter. Make sure you're signing up so that you're getting those information. Most, if not all, of the programming that comes through the hub is free. So that stay connected to the hub to find some of those classes.
I don't really have a question. I was kind of, I guess, taking the discussion path, but to the person who asked,
All right, we are all prepared. We have batteries in the closet, and so we are back. The audio's back. I saw in the chat there were some questions about that. So I think people heard most of what you said, but that the resource you recommend the Women in Cybersecurity web page as content and free information. Oh, yes, customer success. Actually, why don't you just restate that? Because I definitely can't summarize that.
Okay, take two. So, and someone in the chat had asked about transitioning from customer success to IT help desk, which is a great, career path. There are a lot of transferable skills there. Another option would be a customer success role at a technology company, like a SaaS company, software as a service, or a software product company. Again, once you're in that organization, then you can, you'll learn technologies, you'll learn different types of, what systems work together, different integrations, things of that nature. And then you'll, hopefully be able to pivot to, if you want to get more technical, into another part of the organization where you are a little bit more hands-on keyboard.
All right, here's a question right next to you.
Question, discussion. I like this forum. Thank you, Nell, for sharing your story. A lot of it, I agree with, going with your passion, because you started with, the arts, right? And theater. And for myself, like as a teenager, my first job was working at a bookstore. So I loved books, and was able to work at their help desk. They, when you know the systems, you've been working as a bookstore associate, how the software works, how the hardware works. It's a nationwide company that is headquartered in Maryland. So you can do that. And, if it worked with your school schedule, but like it did mine, then it's about being open and being passionate and being true to yourself. And I love how you reflected, you had goals, you enjoyed the arts, you kept those goals apparent, but then you were always open to new adventures, right? And that's the thing, is looking for opportunity that's available, not just what you have planned, but look at all the different tangents that have gotten you to where you are now. My question is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Will you ever retire? I don't know if maybe 5 years, but I see myself here at the college. I've made a career here. There's so much more to do. Cybersecurity is not boring, and it's changing every day. And so there's always a new challenge. So I don't see myself leaving the college, but you're right. Post-retirement, there could be a whole lot of opportunities, either to consult or to volunteer in places like this, to offer my experience. So the path is yet to be determined.
I have a question for you. Do you see a connection between the lighting design that was earlier in your career and sort of where you ended up in cybersecurity? Is it the same creativity or thinking or problem solving?
To some extent. I mean, I think you have to stretch it a little bit, but I think that, the core of who I am has lent itself to, I think that those core creative skills, the collaboration, those are all at play in my current role. There's just, you can't get rid of it. And I'm glad we can't, because, that's what makes it exciting. I really enjoy working with my colleagues. I think the pandemic, has changed the workforce, the work landscape, so that we're not all working together in the same space. We have to be more creative in how we relate to each other. But I do enjoy when I see my colleagues face to face. I enjoy that. But, taking advantage of technology like Zoom and the folks that are watching here today, having that available is also a great avenue to collaboration.
Okay, we are actually heading towards the end of our evening, the fireside chat. So before we do that, first, Nell, again, thank you so much for making time to be here and share your amazing story with us. And I hope we've inspired our guests here and guests online. So thank you. And thank you for bringing your family as well. So yes.
I want to do a shout out. Thank you to my husband and my daughter for being here, supporting me today and every day. And I think I have some friends online and family online as well. So thank you very much for being here.
Okay, good. It's important to do shout outs. Before anybody logs off or goes anywhere, we have a QR code. Of course, we are continuous improvement. So we want to know, what did you think of this event? Do you want to hear more? What else would you like to see at the hub? If you haven't done so already, we actually have a STEM ambassador here joining us, Tamila. Please make sure you've checked in. We gather all kinds of data. Again, it's our first year, so we're trying to baseline. We want to know what kind of impact did we make. So please sign in, fill out the survey. And most importantly, I think there's some food left over. Okay, there is. So please stop there on your way out to grab a plate, take it to go. And thank you, Verizon, again, for sponsoring this. So, and again, thank you. I'll close it with this. Thank you, all of you, for coming this evening, because you all have choices about how to use your time and where to go. And the fact that you decided to come here and be with us is important to me and to all of us here. So thank you.